the energy of an entrepreneur and the willingness to keep going and grind because it's hard and there's a lot of doubts and things like that is not the same as an investor, right? You look at it like a relay race. The guy that gets you from 0 to 1 lap is usually not the guy that gets you from 2 to 3, which is usually not the guy that gets you from 3 to 4. The Elons and the Zuckerbergs are very rare do they take it from nothing all the way to publicly traded in multi-billion.
Well, thanks everyone for joining today's interview here. So today we're going to have a chat with Robert about investing in field services, which is an industry that a lot of people often overlook, but it's essential to the economy, and it's an industry where private equity has been deploying a lot of capital in the recent years. And Robert's, I think, the guy to talk to about this. He's seen it from every single kind of angle of the cycle. He started boots on the ground as a fire safety instructor. He founded a fire safety services company, which he then sold to Summit Fire, which was then backed by BlackRock. Then he joined Summit Fire as a VP, helping them execute on dozens of M&A. And now he runs his own independent sponsor firm called Buffalo Growth Partners, where he's investing in field services across different industries. And he just closed his first acquisition in power generators. So we can talk about that as well. So Robert, thanks for joining us here. But before we get started, I just want to start with a question, which is, what's the one thing that you would want this audience to walk away with about building a services platform the right way?
I think it's about like durability and sustainability. I go back to me and Better Fire and just what you had from a recurring revenue, right? And just understanding the end user, the customer base, and what it is you're building, the repeatability of it, the processes. Yeah, I think that's the name of the game, right? Is sustainability and durability, and how hard it is to really boots on the ground build the operations. I think the saying that I love to tell people is like financial engineering can amplify a business, but it can't create one. And that's probably one of the biggest things, is to say, hey, like at the end of the day, we have to actually do work and make money. And it's important to remember that.
Yeah, doing the work and installing repeatable processes, I think is going to be the theme of the conversation today. But so for those new to your background, so tell us a little bit more about kind of your career story. How did you decide to start out as an instructor, and how did your career evolve from there?
Yeah, long story short, my dad's a 30-year firefighter out of Beaumont, Texas, and I got hired at a large publicly traded company doing fire protection out of grad school. Did that for them for a while. I went through what was called a leadership development program, where you bounced around between new construction and engineering, project management, service. And so you really get to see all these different facets of the business. And, one day we got a fun, passionate discussion, and I was terminated. And so I started a company called Better Fire, and it really was just off the races. Had a unique opportunity down here in Texas to build a fire protection company. And, one of the things that I always tell people is, like, I just had my head down working really hard. I wanted to be a subject matter expert. I was on the business side of things, but I went and got every fire engineering license there was to get, simply because I wanted to be a subject matter expert and be respected in the trades. And that, inevitably what that led to was I had the engineering licenses to open a fire protection company. And so, did that, grew that business, and like you said, ultimately sold it to BlackRock and to Summit, and helped them perform this large buy and build roll up strategy, if you will. And it's just a unique perspective to go from what was a pure organic play at an API group, that's all we did, to starting from zero and building that business up, again, purely organic, zero acquisitions, and then all of a sudden you hop into this massive machine of acquisitions that you're turning out 2 or 3 a month, and stayed there and assisted with that for 5 years. And so you kind of get the full gamut of all of it, all while being like a fire protection expert. And what I tell people is, like, fire protection was my business of choice, but at the end of the day, I'm a business guy, I'm business minded. And that you're making sausage, right? And the internal guts of these businesses, whether it's generators or, EMF shielding or whatever it is, it's very, very similar across the end of the result. It's guys in trucks fixing broken stuff. And so that's really the back end of it. But yeah, that's kind of how the background comes together. I think I was telling you, it's like it looks great on paper. Like, man, this is a incredibly well executed plan. But it was just one of those things where you just get in it, you work really hard, and one thing leads to another, and you just keep building and grinding, and led me to where I am. But to the fire safety instructor, like to your point, like one of the things I did when I remember exactly when I started, I think it was like 2018. I used to fly around the country for a company called Fire Tech, and I would teach fire pump and fire sprinkler like classes on how to work on double interlocked reaction systems and nitrogen systems. And it was all in the name of just being an expert in my craft. And, you know, so that's kind of where that came from.
So I'm curious. I do think it's a little bit of like a different skill set to be a successful entrepreneur versus investor.
Sure.
What are some of the experiences, skill sets, personality traits that made you a successful entrepreneur? Right? I'm guessing you started at a relatively young age as well.
I was 26 when I started Better Fire. I think nowadays it's like you talk about be the buffalo, and I know a lot of people are commenting on the buffalo, and that story, right, is charging into the storm, and that's the kind of the energy that we come together as a herd, and we're going to face the storm and the challenges, and it's really cool to have that as the name, and like one of our core values, right, is to like it. I used it last night at dinner. It's like, hey, our energy is to be the buffalo. Let's go ahead and have this hard conversation right now. That's what we're going to do. And then the other one is really the high agency, right? And I think it's kind of hit, high, and a lot of people have read highagency.com. And the theory of that, right, is that if and what I'm asking you to do, does it defy the laws of physics? And obviously the answer to that's no, right? And so how much time and energy and money do you want to put into solving this problem to get it solved? Because it can be solved. It's not can it, it's should it, or when will. And so I think you're exactly right. Like the energy of an entrepreneur and the willingness to keep going and grind because it's hard, and it's there's a lot of doubts and things like that is not the same as an investor, right? And typically, like you look at it like a relay race. The guy that gets you from 0 to 1 lap is usually not the guy that gets you from 2 to 3, which is usually not the guy that gets you from 3 to 4. Like the Elons and the Zuckerbergs are very rare do they take it from nothing all the way to publicly traded in multi-billion. But it can be done. And so I think it's to me, it's about being self-aware and recognizing what stage of that, process you're in. And at the end of the day, you've got to zoom out and have people on the boots on the ground, people that can help you execute that work and allow you to strategize more rather than do the work yourself.
Just hearing your perspectives on, just business perspectives on high
Yeah.
agency and just get stuff done. I have a funny feeling that there's a story behind why you named your independent sponsor for Buffalo. So we'll talk about that. But I'm curious. So, like, what made you decide to sell your business to Summit Fire? Like, what were some of the things you were looking for? And how similar or different was it once you became part of a bigger PE platform?
We really weren't looking to sell. It's a lot like a lot of other business owners. Is you don't really know what private equity is or how it works. And I tell people like once you see inside the black box, you kind of can't unsee it, which is why I kind of fell in love with it. And the main thing is the liquidity, right? It's a reduction of risk, right? It's no longer your risk, but you have liquidity every 3, 5, 7 years, and then you have the optionality to roll forward the equity and keep going. And they're buying businesses, and really, I did a deep dive on, there's a website out there called A Simple Model. And so I started modeling everything and really trying to understand what it was, the debt, the equity, the multiple arbitrage, the multiple on invested capital and roll forward. And you really get down to the end of it, and it's like, okay, like I see why people do this. Like a lot of people, private equity doesn't work, or they want to, you can't cut your way to a great business, right? Like, that's not how that works. And you have to invest in your people. And so when you really get down into the depth of it, it's like, well, this does make sense, right? To get liquidity and to be able to carry forward and keep building this business and reduce some risk, take some chips off the table. And we were selling into a roll up, right? So they had already done fire protection. It was a pretty safe bet, if you would, because they were already pretty established and stabilized, albeit we were very early, right? We sold in 2020, really right before the rocket ship took off. And so, I would say it was like for me, it was a highly like an educational piece, and it wasn't something that I was overly familiar with, even coming out of like a partial MBA program that was purely focused on organic strategy, P&L management. Like we just didn't go into the depths of M&A and roll-ups. So yeah, I learned a ton by doing it.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful for the context for the audience. Tell us a little bit about like Summit Fire as a platform, just the velocity of M&A you guys were doing in your role there.
Yeah, it's a monster. I mean, there's a handful of them out there. Marmite, Pie Barker, Summit. There's a couple of them that have really done a ton of acquisitions. I mean, I think averaging 2 to 3 a month. Well over 100 in the 5 years that I was there, fully integrated. That was probably the best part was you look at like the integration life cycle and what does that mean? Like a single source ERP, a single source CRM, understanding branding and how you roll those together. And can you put everybody on the same payroll processing system and you get the same insurance benefits and the same general liability. And yeah, it's that process, right? Of getting to see that from the inside and one of the largest, fastest paced roll-ups I think that existed out there. I think similar to like a Brad Jacobs. It was funny when I read Brad Jacobs' book, How to Make a Few $1 billion. It was just like I just laughed the whole time. I'm like, man, this guy's a genius. Like it's a master class of exactly how this is done. And then his new one, How to Make a Few More $1 billion, is. I still haven't convinced myself why he does it in the public. I'm not convinced that's the greatest way to do it, but yeah, man, he's a masterpiece of it.
Well, I think I have some perspectives on why he's willing to publish it because I think the theories are easy, the Excel spreadsheets are easy, and executing it is hard. Which is why I'm so intrigued by like your experience working, inside a PE-backed platform and interacting with the investors. So, curious, like what are some areas that you thought, wow, like you never imagined this was possible as you became a part of the PE-backed platform? And what are some areas that you thought, oh, well, there's a little bit of a gap between, what the investors are modeling on the spreadsheets versus like the real challenges on the ground? Like just talk to us a little bit about kind of the discrepancies.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody loves synergies, right? And I can definitely speak to us here at Buffalo, right? We've got 25 to 30 deals in the pipeline, and I built out the model this morning actually to show all the investors, and modeling in the synergies is always fun, right? And but what I would say is like once you've done it enough, you can really understand implementing like a professional sales team. Like, what does that look like? A lot of owners, especially in the market I'm playing in, the lower middle market, they wear it as a badge of honor. We don't do sales and marketing. It's like, great, because we're going to do that. But I think you begin to see the inefficiencies of people are using Dropbox as their CRM, right? Or they're using scratch paper and things like that. And you understand that, hey, we can get 30% more revenue out of this exact lemon without doing anything but efficiencies and modernizing technology and bringing things up to scale. And I think one of the big things is understanding the human that you're talking to and dealing with and where they fit in that picture. And it's always funny. What I found funny was people always ask me, what do you want me to do? What role do you want me to play? And I always answer it with like, that's not how this works. I can't tell you what you want to do. And if I do, then you're going to do it for 60 or 90 days, and then you're going to be very upset. So there's two converging paths. One is, what do you want to do? How much do you want to work, right? You're fixing to get a check, and do you want to do sales? Do you want to do operations? Do you want to do technology? You have to meet them where they're at. Like trying to force an old operator to be an email answering technology guru is a ginormous waste of time. And then the other path is what does the company need? And where do those two paths converge? And a lot of times, depending on the person, is most of them, want to go into sales. They want to go into customer maintenance or however you want to phrase that title of dealing with the customers and bringing in the business and growing the business. But they're not going to be dashboard managers and understand all this data and what all we're measuring and how gross margin profiles, come together. And that's a piece that you have to plug. And so it was one of the hardest things, and even to this day that we still do, right? It's buying businesses and combining them and combining org charts in one location. I think that's, in my opinion, it's one of the most overlooked aspects of. We've bought a couple of companies in the power generation world, and when you start to combine the org charts together, and you have people that have never met each other but are in the same city or whatever it is, it's hard. It's tough. That's the hardest thing you'll do, right? And that's where I think real leadership comes into play, and having a dose of empathy. And there's a whole world there, right? There's a whole world of how do you actually combine these org charts and deal with people and understand the data and the systems, and to me, that's one of the hardest parts.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think sometimes many, just speaking out of my own experience, right? Sometimes we forget that the businesses we're buying, the biggest assets are actually the people, especially when it comes to services businesses. And so it's easy for us to kind of look at the numbers in Excel, but it's real human beings that we have to kind of manage through the integration process and kind of post merger value creation. I would love to maybe just dig into your thoughts around investing in field services specifically. I would love to hear like what are some of the core philosophies that you have around when you come to buying a business, as well as kind of value creation plan post close.
Yeah, I mean, we put together a value creation plan. You turn it into strategy playbooks, and you begin to slowly march your way to that. I think one of the big parts of it, and like I tell people all the time, that there's no golden daggers, there's no magical fairy dust. Like it's small incremental changes implemented consistently over time equal outsized results. A big part of that is an org chart. As you scale this business, what does that org chart need to look like? What are those clarity of duties? What are people's functions? Making sure they understand how to utilize the technology, making sure the technology is the right fit for the business so that you can actually scale and you're not throwing human bodies at problems because the technology doesn't fit, what you're trying to do in the processes you're trying to implement. And so around the value creation plan, I mean, for us, it's basically looking at, where's the lowest hanging fruit. And a lot of times that's in sales and marketing. It's understanding the commission plans. What is the ideal customer base? Like the way that I phrase it to people is I should be able to take your sales plan and read it. And then I should understand the goals of your business because not all margin dollars are created equal. Working for ExxonMobil versus Motel 6, those are two different customer profiles. It's two different, processes. And so it's like, how are we incentivizing our people where it's not so overly complex, you need a PhD to understand it, but it's also driving the value of the business forward in the manner that we want it driven. And so it's like, that's the front end of the spear, right? Of sales and marketing and how do we grow, the top of the funnel. And then you get into the systems. And really what I tell people and the way that my team and I approach it is it's constraint-based growth. There's always a supplier demand constraint, and it's either we don't have enough techs in the field. Okay, well, how do we solve for that? How do we train people? How do we hire people? How do we get recruits and bring them in? How do we go to the military and single source generator technicians and things like that? And then, okay, now we have a demand problem. We need more sales. Okay, great. Now we have a technology problem, right? What is the technology we have in place? And so you really just go, like I call it whack-a-mole. You go from problem to problem to constraint, and you begin to solve. And then again, you turn around in 9 months and you've made small incremental changes consistently implemented over time, and you have a different business. And that's, you do that times a handful of acquisitions, and all of a sudden math works really well. That's where the spreadsheet comes in.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love your philosophy around making small incremental changes consistently over time. I think a lot of us, at least on the investment side, forget that people are running the businesses day to day, and we kind of hear about the updates every quarter, and so we kind of expect things to be done in a faster turnaround than what is sometimes feasible or even good for the business, right? So I heard four things: org
Yes.
chart, tech, sales and marketing, and hiring. I'd love
Yeah.
to dig into each of them. So for org chart, like I would love to hear a perspective on how not to do it, so people can learn, some
Yeah.
mistakes to avoid, and then what good looks like from your perspective as you think about org chart in a field services roll up playbook.
Yeah. It's really all based around revenue. And so as you build it out, it all comes to, and it's the unfair advantage of a roll up, right? Even where we're at with power generation, you're kind of stamping out a very similar business over and over and over again. And you begin to, you have one person who says, hey, I'm running a $4 million service department and I'm maxed out. I can't do this anymore. It's like, okay, but the guy over there in Houston is running an $8 million service department and he's, doing just fine. So what about your systems and your processes are not aligned with his, and how can we get you two together to figure out how we can get efficiencies of scale? And so the org chart is probably one of the most important things to nail down and clarify their duties. What do the admins do, right? Do we need to have another service manager, or can we hire an admin that can bridge the gap of your strengths and weaknesses? 99% of these guys' strengths is going to be technical competency. 99% of their weaknesses is going to be this computer. They're not keyboard warriors. I've bought in people classes on how to type. And I think one of the things to remember, and this is really like a human psychology, is like last Tuesday before you bought their company, they went home, they had a great dinner, they just went to bed, and life was great. Well, now all of a sudden you're here, you've bought their business, you're implementing these new processes, you're ripping, everything they've known for the last 5 to 10 years out, and you're putting this new stuff in, and you're all motivated and cheery because you have a pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, and you understand your multiple on invested capital, and you're doing all this stuff. Well, they're still getting paid the same salary. They're not an equity holder. And I've had this conversation where it's like, hey, like, why wouldn't I just go down the road and make the same $80,000 I'm making now? Why am I putting myself through this torment? Y'all are trying to scrub all this data and implement all these things and change all this stuff. Like, why on earth would I ever stay here? And you're sitting there and like, how would you answer that question? And so it's a piece of empathy to understand. And I've sat down with a lot of the generator companies and had these conversations, and that's where you just have a dose of reality of saying, okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's look at this org chart. Let's understand who you are as a human. What do you want to do? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What does the business need? And you begin to color around it and understand that, like, integration, we're building this airplane while it's flying. Like, these guys are still running work. So they still have to go fix generators. And again, last Tuesday, they were just having a regular day. And then all of a sudden you showed up. It's like,
Yeah.
and I think and to us, it's just another day. It's like, yeah, I bought a ton of companies, and look, we bought this one and this one, and I know generators, and I can, but they're still trying to wrap their head around, like, what was that guy's name? Who is he? Like, and what is he telling me to do? And so, to me, like, that's one of the hardest parts, is where real leadership comes into play, in building out the org chart, having a clarity of duties, really understanding strengths and weaknesses, giving people time and grace to digest what it is we're doing. And ultimately, like, what I tell a lot of people is, like, you find the people that want to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to do more. I view this as an opportunity. I see what you guys are doing. Please lean on me, and I want to help. And then that's great. And there's certain people that are like, I just want to go fix generators. It's like, awesome. Let's do that too.
I mean, I think empathy is very important, but it's hard to learn or hard to teach. But what about just like practically speaking, right? If somebody like myself, like, I don't know too much about field services really, but I can wrap my head around it. But I have a thesis and I want to learn more. Like, what are some practical ways in which somebody like myself or people in the audience can go and kind of figure this out, so that when they do go and acquire, they don't screw it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing, right, if I was giving advice, and I teach a class at A&M on entrepreneurship through acquisition, right? And these are college kids coming out wanting to go buy a business, so they're really fresh. The best advice I could give you is go find an incredible operator. Like, when you look at, like, the seats at the table to get a deal done, and you guys know that best than anybody, it's, you have all different seats: the finance, the legal, the accounting, the tax, the operations, and you have to find an incredible operator, because, and this is an offensive statement, but it's not meant to be offensive, is there are lessons learned in these trenches that you can't read in a book.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just part of life, right? Like, it's just understanding what it's like when a guy walks in with a pipe wrench in your office and he's not very happy, right? And it's like, this is, I always ask them whenever we're interviewing people, it's like, do you have an assault charge on your record? Because, like, this is real rough stuff. These guys are real guys out there in trucks fixing broken stuff, and that we live in, and it's incredible margin opportunities. The businesses are incredible. There's a ton of opportunity, but you've got to take a dose of reality of the industry you're getting into. And my best advice to anybody that doesn't have the experience of doing it is go partner with operators that do, because a lot of them, what does your typical operator look like in the lower middle market? It's a technician who left their job that was upset and angry and like, I'm not getting yelled at anymore. I'm gonna go start a business. And 10 years later, they turn around, they've got 25 technicians. They went through 7 bookkeepers. They're on a cash basis. The revenue comes in as one line item. They have no idea what gross margin is, or net margin, or contribution margin, or any of that stuff. So don't mention it to them, because they're going to get lost. But they jump at the opportunity of a guy that can help them build a business. And they're like, wait a minute. So you understand business and what a P&L is, and a cash flow statement, a balance sheet. And that's really where, like, you get the upper hand, is saying, yeah, you understand the operations. You're an expert. I'm an expert at business. And that's the way I describe private equity. Everybody was asking me, what is private equity? It's the business of building businesses. You're an expert at generators. I'm an expert at business. you combine the two of us, but I also know what a crescent wrench is, and so it's like trying to have some grace for them. And where I've seen people go wrong is where the disrespect comes in, and you feel like you're above someone because you understand the finance world versus, and they'll tell you straight up, like, I don't know what EBITDA is. I can't spell it. Fine, no big deal, and so it's just having that humility to connect with them one on one.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. It's definitely one of the things that I've come to realize that like my own limitations in that, thus far in my career, it's been a bubble and on Wall Street, right?
That's
It
it.
is,
Yeah,
yeah, that's it, right? And unless I'm, acquiring companies that have Wall Street level employees or selling into Wall Street, like I probably will not be an expert in that. So finding a partner, like as you suggested, is a viable option and definitely something that people should explore seriously. But also at the same time, I think what you said about, hey, you're expert out there, but I also am an expert investing in business, right? There's value to that, right? So I think it's an element of combination of humility as well as, being able to recognize your own strengths as well.
and
That's great.
communicating that story. I think that's a big part of it, right? Is you always have to go in with a story that you can communicate around. What is it that you're going to do? It's the most common question I get when we're buying companies is like, so what is the strategy? What is a value creation plan? How are you going to help me? And being able to like clearly articulate and lay out visual process mapping, constraint-based growth, technology. And then you start to ask questions like, so do you think every single piece of material that comes out of your warehouse gets charged for on a work order? And then you just stop and you stare at them and they're like, yeah, no, that's not possible. It's like, I know. Do you think every hour that you pay your technicians gets charged for or is accounted for in some way, whether it's drive time, tech tool time? Every minute of those guys' time is charged for. There's no way. That's what I'm here to solve. You know. So have that
Yeah,
story.
well, have the story. That's great. What about technology? So I have some, war stories about tech and roll up senses. So I'd love to hear your perspectives on it.
Yeah, it's nice, at Buffalo and with the generators, like you kind of get to start from ground zero. And we've seen like, if we back all the way up, right, to when I first started, I've been in the service world for 12 or 13 years now. The world of technology since like 2014, 2015 has really changed these branch-based service businesses. And it was around that 2015-ish time mark where these big companies started to implement field service management software. And it's just rapidly taken off. And so the hard part is that, especially like you mentioned in a roll up, once you're so deep down the rabbit hole, it's really hard to turn the ship. And like if you decide like, oh, I'd like to do a different CRM or whatever, I mean, that's a whole world. So with us, we're starting off in the lower middle market. We're getting to implement, and you pick your flavor, right? Service Titan, Service Trade, Salesforce, Field Servio. I mean, there's a million of them out there. It's really going back to understanding a lot of them were built in a generality, and a lot of times they hand you a buffet of a menu. And what my experience with it has been, and kind of what we're doing now, we've settled on a couple of different Trojan horses, is like you have to stop development at some point because they hand you an open box and they say this open box can do anything you want, right? It's a platform that you build on top of. And as you're continuing to develop and that never ends, the people on the other end of it are the ones that their process is constantly changing because you're constantly developing. And so it's like for us, let's get what we want. But in order to understand what you want, you've got to understand the processes and all the edge cases of dispatching and scheduling and work orders. And it's just not straightforward. There's 100 different scenarios and you're going to solve for hopefully greater than 50% of them. And so, it's what I tell people, it's the hardest thing you'll do. It's the number one hardest thing you'll do. It's the number one limiting factor of what you do. Because if you don't do it right and you can't scale with it, what you end up doing is throwing human bodies at it to solve for the problems the technology can't do. And then your OpEx goes up, your overhead goes up, and now we're in this death cycle. And then you're doing a massive roll up and you're adding to it and you're trying to scrub the data and point the data right. AI is a huge help in that, but it's by far the hardest thing you'll do is choose the technology platforms that you want to integrate. And the one thing I'll end with this part on it is I always tell people, remember your customer as you're designing it, make it easy to do business with you. But when I say remember your customer, I don't mean the guys paying your bills. I mean your employees. Because I've seen it in some of these roll-ups and like in the generator world and everything where you have 9 different pieces of technology that none of them communicate, and your technicians end up not wanting to work there because it's so hard. They've turned themselves into software engineers to try and log into 9 different systems to log PTO and take pictures and file this report and then download it and upload it over here, and none of it talks, and where are the notes, and they're constantly getting phone calls, and it's like, hey, man, I'm just going to go work somewhere else. And so I think it's all around, right? It's just critically the most important thing you'll decide, and you really don't want to make that decision lightly.
Yeah, there are two questions related to that. One is, so would you suggest that you pick a technology stack up front and then mandate, an integration, full integration for the acquired companies? So that's question number one. And for question number two, how do you evaluate the tech stack? Like, do you have any perspectives on using vendors to do it, or like, what was your process for picking your own technology stack?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, especially when you buy a business, it's understanding and not trying to give them too much of a culture shock. So for our world, right, in the generator space, we're letting them operate on their legacy systems for a little bit as we get the data right and put it into our new system. And then you get into a sandbox environment and you test and make sure everything's live. And then you do your training, and like there's just a lot of involvement there while you're still running work orders and you're still processing invoices and you're still maintaining cash flows and billings and things. So that's a whole world, right, of how do you actually integrate appropriately. And a lot of that, and a lot of M&A goes back to psychology and sitting people down and trying to get them to buy in on and understand the why. And ultimately, the truth of it is, right, especially in the world I'm playing in, is like anything is better than what they're doing now. It is more efficient because they're just not utilizing technology. And if they are,
Yeah.
it's just completely haphazard. And so, it's great to be able to do that. For us, lucky, we have the experience of like really understanding the process in which a work order gets created from a CRM standpoint and the life cycle all the way through collections. And so we kind of sunk our teeth into one. We, hired an integrator, like a third-party integrator, which you kind of have to help build that out and put the constraints in. Because one of the issues you'll see in platforms is there's 55 buttons to press, but only 12 of them pertain to you. But guys
Yeah.
that don't know what to press, they end up going off into Narnia, and then
Yeah.
work orders get sent, all over the place. And that's where the dashboards come into place, and understanding how, like, what does an unbilled cost report look like? And how do you actually track these work orders that have been open for 90+ days and they haven't had anybody touch them? And like, and it's constantly sifting through this data and building out a process to where these people are working their way through it. None of it's rocket science, right? But it's just teaching people. It's a different way of doing business. But there's a lot of margin dollars left on the table from, oh, we just forgot to bill Tommy, and like that just goes away. But that's where software doesn't. Like software never, forgets. I say that sometimes it does, big glitches, right?
Well, in terms of like, a lot of software platforms having a lot of bells and whistles, I always
Yeah.
think to myself, after having some integration issues along the way throughout my career, is the next worst thing to not having data is having data that doesn't make any sense.
That's
And
fun. Yeah.
I think a lot of people fall victim to that.
Yeah.
And so like for in your experience, what about sequence of tech integration? Like, do you have a sequence in terms of, all right, we're going to mandate the CRMs get integrated first, ERPs or field services, field service management tools? Like, what are some of the sequencing of like how you think about integration?
Yeah, ideally, your CRM and your field service management are tied together. Like that's kind of the ultimate goal. If not, if you're starting to patch HubSpot into Zoho, or you're starting to do these API integrations, like of course every tech sales guy tells you it works flawlessly and everything's beautiful, but that's not always the case, right? And so you look at like a Salesforce or a Service Titan or a Service Trade, or a lot of the bigger, beefier platforms are fully integrated from a CRM to a field service management. And typically you have some sort of, tech stack of truth behind it, which would be an ERP, whether that's Sage Intacct or that's QuickBooks or whatever it is. That's like the most common structure that you see. And to me, I like it the most because as you create a new customer profile and they want to work their way through a quoting process or whatever it is, and then that just goes straight seamlessly into a work order. And that kind of is the sole source of truth of data in there. I would say one of the things is you really want to lock down the data manipulation on who can go in and manipulate the data, and mainly in regards to like your bill to customer, changing contact information and things like that at the parent company level. Most of them, again, they're all kind of the same, right? There's a parent-child relationship between customers and site locations and tax statuses and all these different things. That's one of the hard parts is taking the data out of a legacy system. Typically, you're pulling it out of like a QuickBooks and you're putting it into a structured process or a structured way database to push it into your new one. And your hope there, right, is that it pushes in and gets absorbed in the correct manner. All these fields point to the right place, and that's just hard, right? And it's cumbersome, and you want the legacy help of the software system to team to help you and make sure that it's right. Because like you said, you start running work orders to dead end runs, or this was due in March, but really it's not due till October. And then all of a sudden you turn around and like, not only are your guys out charging time to go run work orders, you're also not billing for anything because it's all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, okay, so now how do you fix it? Right. Well, the answer is manual. You look at the old legacy system, which is theoretically correct because that's the legacy system, and you begin to manually correct it. Or time consuming, very frustrating for an hourly employee that's like, hey, last Tuesday before you got here and messed all this up, I was doing just fine. So really, you want to get this right.
Yeah. And, those small things can actually balloon into real issues. For example, cash flow issues, right? Like you
Yes,
screw
sir.
up your billings and you figure it out a few months later, and you have to reset the clock in terms of collections, and then there's pushback from the clients because they're forgotten about it, right? It was 6 months ago,
Yeah.
and suddenly you have networking capital issues, right? Okay, what about sales and marketing? Like
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you like to implement in the first 100 days? What are some things that you have seen other people do it that's like a no-no?
Yeah, I think the marketing side of things with AI and that world of like SEO, pay-per-click, Google ad campaigns, it depends on what industry you're in. Like what I would say is if you're going to go into the residential world, like that's the top number one thing you need to figure out is how to run marketing. And whether it's Facebook ads, Instagram, Google, if you're running roofing companies or whatever it is, right? Like the marketing side is a massive top end lead funnel. In the B2B world, it's not that important. Most of your actual sales are built through professional sales organizations and outside sales reps and things like that. I would say design their comp plan and really go into the process. So when you think of systems and processes, most people think of operations. And it's like, this work order goes here, this PO gets filed, inventory gets relieved, we're, recognizing revenue based on our cost on this margin profile, and you just process your way through it. And most sales teams are built on raw horsepower. And you have a handful of guys that are just studs and they go out there and they sell, or ladies, and they have raw horsepower and they just get it done. But that's not repeatable. How do you train a sales team on that process? And so understanding like nobody ever wants to read a script. Well, the purpose of a script is not to be read like a robot. It's to lead you down a path to eventually get you to an outcome, right? And so it's really holding people's feet to the fire on the dashboards and the data management and inputting the information in the CRM. And so that you can actually measure this and you can forecast accurately on what are we bidding versus what are we winning? What is our hit ratios? What is our margins? And it goes back to like you set the tone. And that's the beauty of the lower middle market, kind of where we're at is I tell my team all the time, we set the tone. The moment you buy the company, you set the tone for what is the cadence of how we operate, the standard of excellence that we set. They don't know any better. So they're looking to you for guidance. And if you start out day one, this is how we do it. This is what we do. We speak through the technology. Most important thing as a leader, speak through your technology. You are always going back to your dashboards, always bringing up your software systems, always talking about it, looking at it, referencing the business by it. Eventually people begin to adopt it and they have to use it. And then that's how the sales team slowly begin to adopt and go in there. And I say it all the time, right? That like everything is special, everything's hard, leadership really matters. And sales is one of those places, right? Salespeople are finicky. They've got opinions. They're usually pretty articulate. They don't want you to mess with their commission plans. And one of the things is you have to model out that nobody goes backwards, right? And you have to do that. And especially like some of these comp plans you'll see are just kind of crazy. But ultimately, what doesn't lie? Their W-2 income, right? So let's just start there. Let's start at the end. What did you make last year? All right, let's back our way into how that works. You sold X, and now we're going to base it on gross margin instead of revenue. And here's a spreadsheet on exactly how it looks. And like, understanding that all of these people that you're buying, right? People build great businesses. All these people you're buying, they have goals, they have dreams, they have ambitions. They want to buy a house, pay for their kids' college. And you have to make sure that you're spelling out the opportunity for them, not just we're doing this in this business and this is how we are going to do it. Like get specific, spend time with them, make sure that they're focused. Because if not, they're just going to go find another job. Like the war on talent is as high as it can be, especially in the services trades world. Like they'll just, eventually walk in one day and what happened to John? Oh, well, he left. Well, why? He didn't like the commission plan. Why did we talk about it? Why didn't you talk about it? Why didn't you address it with, give them a chance? So I know that was a
Yeah.
lot of information. I feel
No,
like I
no,
was,
no, no, no. That I think that's great. Like, I think we often forget that a lot of, especially non-finance professionals, right? We are used to these like complex multi-tab, 20-tab LBO models and making sense of it. But a lot of people just want to get it, kind of spoon-fed to them. And really that's like how you make things tangible, right? Make it simple, make it realistic, and make it something that they can actually achieve.
napkin math only. That's what I tell people. Napkin
Yeah.
math only. You can't write it down on a napkin, then it ain't gonna work.
One more question around this. I've always wondered about this, which is how soon after the acquisition should you change the comp plan? Because I've seen people do this over a 2-year period and things worked out, didn't work out. Well, what are your thoughts on it?
It's just highly variable. It really depends. I mean, depends on what their comp plan is, how it's structured. Again, you read it. Can you tell me the goals of the business? Are we actually incentivizing? Because every single salesperson is going to do their best to gamify the comp plan. And they're going to go after what is the highest and best use of me making the absolute most amount of money. As long as the one that you're implementing doesn't allow them to go backwards. And there's times where it does. Like there's times where you look at a comp plan and say, this is impossible and this doesn't make sense. Right. And that's just a part of the business you have to model in and understand what that's going to do. For us, I would say it's usually sooner than later. We try to implement our stuff up front, if and carry it forward. I would say a lot of people don't spend a ton of time really narrowing down the comp plan and like really incentivizing recurring revenue, really incentivizing monitoring revenue, really incentivizing high gross margin, really having a different tier system for certain customers. Right? What is a tier 1 customer? A data center. What is a tier 3 customer? Motel 6. How do we incentivize those differently? What you don't want to do is basically turn all your salespeople into what I call whale hunters, where all they do is go after massive accounts. And then now your 30% of your revenue comes from one customer. Like there's just a lot of different ways, but you also don't want a 17-page incentive plan. So how do you get this thing down to 2 pages, easily digestible, drives the revenue of the business the way you want? AI's made life a lot easier, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I once received a comp plan that I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I think I'm pretty good at numbers. I can't figure this out. Well, speaking of, going in sooner rather than later and making changes, right? That kind of go in and charge mentality,
Yeah.
which I'm guessing there has something to do with the name Buffalo Growth. I'd love to talk about, what you're doing now. So I guess first question, any stories behind Buffalo Growth? Like what are you trying to achieve with it? What are you excited about? Like, what are you doing these days?
I mean, it's lower middle market, service-based, B2B, mission critical, guys in trucks fixing broken stuff, backed by a family office, raise some money. Think we have a unique, unfair advantage in that space. And so we're building platforms up to sell to what I would call traditional private equity, kind of the world that I came from, right? Let's get them up to 10, 15, $20 million of EBITDA. They're geographically, concentrated, if you will, in the Southeastern Conference. They're diversified. They're, highly fragmented industries, and they're ripe for a roll-up opportunity. And really, our plan, right, is obviously we want to build something sustainable, durable, real systems, real technology, real processes. This isn't, lipstick on a pig, slam together EBITDA. It's a real durable business, and the goal, right, is that someone's going to overpay because of the culture that you've been able to put in place and the systems you've been able to put in place. And now it's ready for, ripe opportunity, which is they want to throw a bunch of money at it. And that it's ready, it's durable, it's ready for that. So yeah, that's what we're doing, and been hard at it for the last 4 or 5 months, and a lot of activity, trying to get some deals done.
Yeah. Why power generators as your first kind of thesis?
Yeah, I go back to like you want to operate where you have an unfair advantage, and the one saying I give people a lot is like what you do matters more than how hard you work. And this is one of those tailwind industries. When you look from a macro standpoint, it's like it's got everything coming for it with data generation. And you look at that world of data centers that's taken off. Every data center I've looked at has anywhere between 5 and 10 like 1 meg generators. And when you really break it down, like what is a generator? A lot of times in this case, it's a large diesel engine with a massive alternator strapped to the front of it that generates power. Okay, so basically what you're doing is you're building out mobile diesel mechanics, and they're
Mhm.
changing oil, and they're changing filters and fan belts and idler pulleys and fan shrouds, and they're essentially mechanics, right? And then you're having to do load bank testing and fuel polishing, and it's just a highly recurring industry. A lot of people think like, oh, you need to be an electrician. Well, the electricians install them, but then the service companies service them, and you stack up thousands of these things, and they need to be monitored, and they need to be tested on a semi-annual or quarterly basis. And you turn around and it looks a lot like what I've done in the past. And so it's just a good industry, good business.
Yeah, I mean, I love the thesis. I
Yeah.
recently was talking to two of my friends. One guy working in digital infra PE, one guy doing prop trading, trading electricity actually based in Texas as well in big markets. When we were talking about AI, and then the digital infra guy was saying that there are not enough chips to there are not enough data centers to serve all the chip demand that's been being produced. And then the prop trader guy said there's not enough electricity to support all the data center stuff. So I think there's a lot of macro tailwinds behind this. Um, so I'm going to open up to questions in maybe a couple minutes here. But so if anyone from the audience has any questions, feel free to submit them through the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen here. But in the meantime, I have some rapid fire questions for you, Robert. So just quick reactions, whatever pops up in your mind first. Okay. So if you weren't needing an indie sponsor firm, Buffalo Growth, or any field services businesses, it can't be PE or it can't be field services. What business would you want to run?
That's really tough. It can't be private equity, and it would have to be something in AI, right? Like I've done a lot of work. We've got a couple in-house software engineer guys, and did the world of AI with Claude Bot and Claude Code, and we, those guys really are a master class of teaching me about it. Yeah, I would absolutely be building some sort of tech type startup, and probably would be building it for the field service world, because I think it's underutilized and it's too broad. A lot of the technology is way too broad versus these edge cases, the specific nuances. So yeah, it'd be something in AI.
Got it. I can see that you're an entrepreneur at heart. What about a book, podcast, or resource you recommend to the audience to learn more about field services or just investing philosophies in general?
I would have to plug in GoBundance. I sit on the board of GoBundance, which is really the philosophy of it is like iron sharpens iron. It's just men being better men, better fathers, better husbands, better business owners, better leaders. And so I think that's an incredible organization, over 1,000 members nationwide. I call it a digital country club. And I think it's a masterclass of getting to see real operators, the guys who actually created the wealth, if you will. And you get to get in there and talk about it in the trenches. I'm doing helicopter pig hunting with a guy who's got a $400 million business doing DoD contracting here in a couple of weeks. And so just all kinds of really unique operators and guys doing stuff. And so masterclass of learning for sure.
Great. Last question here. The most overrated or underrated advice you received?
Yeah. I think the one thing, and I hate to see it, but I see a lot of people go out and the most, I guess, overrated advice is to buy a business in the service world, right? It's just really the Alex Hormozzi's, the Cody Sanchez's of the world, and they motivate a lot of people to go do this. And I think it is incredible. I think entrepreneurship is awesome. I think it's great. I think it's freeing, but it's a very small subset of the people that want to have what it takes to get that done. And so I think that's probably the most overrated advice is like, oh, just jump into it. Just go figure it out. I think an underrated piece of advice would be to go experience it and work in those industries for a month and really understand what you're doing. I think that's part of like college, like go do an internship and like see, like, is this really what you want to do and really what you want to sink your teeth into? Because what you do matters more than how hard you work. And like just purely like the grind mentality, like it just doesn't always say like, oh, I'm just going to work harder than people. That's not how this works. And so it's just educate yourself on the space. Go talk to operators. A lot of people, just like me, are willing to give advice and kind of talk about it. And I probably talk to one guy a week on like, what does this look like? And what is certified payroll? What is Davis-Bacon wage rates? What is bonding? What is liquidated damages? And like, do you really understand? Like, do you want to get yourself up against the wall here? So I think that'd be my best piece of advice is like caution before you go into it.
Yeah, I think I resonate with that. Don't just listen to general advice from social media. Go actually talk to people one on one and
Yeah.
really learn from that. Okay, so I have some questions from the audience. Okay, so in fire safety, how important is building density, and how did you decide between acquiring a target in the market that you're already in versus just organically competing for their customers?
I mean, fire safety is an incredible industry. I think a lot of that goes back to the customer base. And again, if you try to sell into ExxonMobil or whoever, right? Name your ginormous customer that's hard to get into. Like you don't just walk into it and say, "Hi, I'm here to sell something," or "I'd love to service your fire extinguishers." That's usually whenever you're doing a massive roll up, like you're getting that compounding interest of their customer base. And then that you're able to buy materials at a cheaper price. You're able to increase prices. They haven't done that in 20 years or whatever it is. And so that's the power of a roll up in any industry, right? That's what they're doing. But yeah, a lot of it is tuck-in based, right? You've got a massive platform in XYZ city and you can do a couple of tuck-ins, but like that's also some of the hardest stuff we've ever done is personalities of org charts and combining org charts. And what I'll say, like the harder, like everybody wants specifics, right? So what's hard about that? The hard part is like it's the emotional reality in your own mind of saying, okay, I have an org chart of 100 people, 20 of them are in the office, and I know these people through and through. I've been working with them for 5 years. The reality of it is the company you're buying, those people might be better than yours. And most people can't think of it that way. It's like, oh, well, John's already my service manager, so I'm going to keep John. Well, their service manager might just be better. And so now how do you handle that? How do you repurpose people? How do you, and then the other side of it is you never know until the dust settles because, Tim and John might know each other. They might hate each other and you just don't know that. Right. And so it's like there's all these things that get thrown in there with personalities and they're in the same community. And he used to sold me a dog and like, dude, I've recovered hundreds of different things and it's just always something new. But that's the fun of it, right? That's the beauty of it. And it's being the buffalo. It's sitting down and saying, we're going to have this hard conversation. We're going to charge the storm. We're going to figure this out. Like this is figured out. We're not defying physics. Let's get this done.
Yeah, it's funny because I think some of the stories that I've heard from more kind of industrials, roll-ups, some of the personalities and events that has happened is way, way more wild than what I was exposed to in more of the white collar services businesses.
A lot of HR problems. A lot of HR problems.
Hey, but it makes it, exciting. Never a dull day. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on fire safety as a roll-up thesis today? Do you think it's still attractive? Like how has valuations kind of changed over the last 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, no, it's an incredible industry. I think it gets lumped into like a very generalized term, and it's very similar to HVAC with building automation and controls. And there's a lot of like plumbing. But what about med gas and all these edge cases? And fire safety is the same way. And mainly, you think about the diversity of the customers, right? You have sprinkler systems, you have warehouses, you have data centers, you have offshore rig platforms, you've got FM200 like gaseous type systems, and then you get into fire alarm and low voltage, which is an entire plant over there of audio visual, security, access control, patient wandering systems, nurse call, like so it's tough to say like fire safety, right? Because it is massive, and there's a lot of energy and effort in there. But no, it's an incredible industry. It's highly regulated, massive tailwinds. It's not going anywhere. There are a lot of people doing a lot of roll-ups in fire safety. And so I do think it's been heavily rolled up. But if you go back to the history of the industry back in like Simplex, Johnson Controls days in the 90s, and like this has been done before. And some of the behemoths come out on top. And I think if I had to look at it from a different lens, it's like, how do the consolidators consolidate the consolidators? And we haven't really seen that a ton. Like I think like Ty Barker's bought some of the really big PE-backed companies. API Group just bought Certisite, which is another large PE-backed roll-up, and I think Summit bought PSI right as I was leaving, which was a really big business. And so I think that's probably the stage of where you're at, is seeing consolidators consolidate the consolidators, which is really interesting, right? Because now you really are baking in synergies and you're trying to figure that out, and it's there's just from a capital stack perspective, right? From a financial modeling perspective, like you have to continue that wind of it. But I think it's an incredible industry. I think there's always going to be opportunity. It's not going to slow down. So
Probably have time for one more question, and
yeah,
this is a little bit more general, but so some of the audience are kind of searchers themselves, and I think they are curious to hear your perspectives on sourcing. Obviously, I think you have done an incredible job on that front as well. I know you have a pretty big pipeline as well. So, like, what's your approach to sourcing, and how do you use AI? How do you make sure you can stand out in this kind of crowded space?
yeah. I think one of us doing stuff like this, right, is generating content. And I mentioned GoBundance, and we've done a couple podcasts there. And like, I've been pretty surprised by when you start to talk to people and get deep into it, they begin to Google your name and they begin
Mm.
to search you and listen to your podcast and listen to the stuff you put out. And they read all of your posts. And like, I get reach out on LinkedIn, like once a week, people reach out to me. And so I would say that's one part of it, right? Putting yourself out there. The second part is the story. It's when I sit down with an owner in a generator company and I tell them my story and we start to talk about very specifics of what they do, they begin to understand that this guy can really help. Like he understands the technical competency as well as the finance side. You've kind of been there and done that. So that's a complete unfair advantage. And so it's just trying to get a foot in that door. And what I would say is like the unfair advantage of a roll up is every business you buy, that owner knows 10 people. And then that next owner knows 10 people and the next one. And then all of a sudden your phone, oh, it's a snowball. And then they start calling you and you're like, and then you just can't keep up. Like you're just completely inundated. And that's the beauty of a roll up. I tell a lot of people like the synergies and the financial modeling and like it depends on what their plan is, right? Is it a permanent hold? Is it cash flow? Is it distributions? How did you set up the fund? Like there's a whole world there, right? But the roll up is really the beauty of it is the flywheel. Once you get in the industry and people begin to know who you are, you do good deals, you do right by people, you allow for roll forward equity, they get a second bite at the apple, and then all of a sudden that kind of energy gets out there and then it just starts to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a definitely good reminder for everyone that you got to have a unique background and you got to be able to build a story that's compelling and frankly have the patience to build a snowball that you get going. So Robert, first of all, thank you again for joining us. And I know you are early in your investing journey still, but I am so excited to keep watching you and kind of see how your journey unfolds. And really can't wait to maybe have a catch-up conversation in 3 to 5 years, because I have a funny feeling that it's going to be an incredible story. It's been an incredible story thus far, and thank you again for sharing your knowledge with the Road to Carry community.
Absolutely, man. No, I appreciate you guys, and I love your audience. I've talked to a lot of them. If anybody wants to reach out, LinkedIn's probably the best place, and just let me know how I can help.
Great. Well, thanks again, everyone.